Hi, Ben.
Hello.
Hi, Ben. It's so nice to have you with in this conversation today. How you doing?
Doing great, Maria. Thank you so much for inviting me on to have this conversation about nutrition and health.
Yeah, thank you. I was just thinking that this is the first time we do this at Terraseed, and I'm not by any means like a podcaster or like an interviewer, like a professional interviewer. So excuse me if I'm not like the best interviewer. Um, it's very exciting to have Ben with us today, or with me in this case, because we connected through like a common friend, and I thought like Ben's experience was really interesting. And as you know, like running a business, a nutritional supplement business, we get a lot of questions from customers about nutrition, health, in our case, like sustainability. So I just thought it would be amazing if we could connect and have this interview and ask you some of the most pressing questions our customers have, and just give them answers from your perspective. I think your experience is amazing. Ben Alter is a naturopathic doctor specializing in nutritional science, lifestyle medicine, and mind body healing. And he's the founder of Alter Health, and he helps people optimize their health and well-being through one-on-one coaching and group programs that address the root causes of imbalance, not only physically but mentally and emotionally. And he's also the creator of Green Force, a premium greens powder developed through V's Foods, designed to support detoxification and metabolic health. He has a deep understanding of both science and human potential, and he empowers others to take charge of their well-being through practical, evidence-based strategies that align with the body's innate ability to heal. Thank you
Couldn't
so
have said it
much.
better.
That's a
Couldn't
lot.
have said it better than myself. Did I write that?
It sounds very compelling, and I'm hoping to, through our conversation today, to actually unfold all these. And maybe the first question I have for you is how did everything start? How did you were you drew to naturopathic and holistic medicine, and how did you decide that that was your calling, your path in life?
Yeah, well, long story short, excuse me, I kind of always knew that I wanted to be a doctor from quite a young age. I always just was fascinated with the human body. And I went to college in Arizona, and there's a medical school there at the University of Arizona. And I was just thinking, all right, I'm going to be a doctor, go to this school. And I didn't know that the whole world of quote unquote holistic alternative medicine existed. I just saw the conventional, standard, traditional path. So long story short, I kind of life intervened, as I like to say. The universe intervened and kind of gave me challenges with my health and with my, kind of a spiritual crisis, if you will.
Okay.
And I learned about naturopathic medicine, and I met a naturopathic doctor, and she kind of just said, "Oh, this world existed. Why don't you consider maybe doing this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think I will." So my one of the pivotal experiences in that decision making process was I actually was sick. Like I mentioned, I was living and I was this was after college, and I found myself getting sick repeatedly,
Hmm.
and I didn't know what the heck was going on. I was eating really good food. I was, living in a clean environment, and I realized it was actually just more of a quote unquote homesickness. I
Wow.
felt lonely. I felt kind
Hmm.
of isolated, and I was kind of like, what am I doing with my life? And it was really just that instant of, oh my gosh, there's nothing wrong, and then everything was better. And that's not to say that my experience totally transformed. I still kind of felt alone, but I didn't feel sick. I wasn't manifesting those sorts of symptoms. So I was really fascinated by multidimensional human experience and health from that understanding. So that kind of planted the seed of like, oh yeah, I want to be a quote unquote holistic doctor. And that has totally morphed and transformed. And I have become at times like super geeked out on the nutritional science and the physical things. And then I come back to the mind body stuff. And, I'm to be honest, just kind of still finding my balance of like what matters most. And I think everything does.
Everything.
So I guess I'm going on a blabber here, but yeah, that's what leads me to kind of have my business Alter Health, which is intended to help people see their blind spots in their foundation of health, as I like to call it.
That's amazing how things happen in just one brief moment, right? Like you have like this realization, like this aha moment, and everything becomes very clear, right? Like in your case, like feeling the connection between your emotions, your mind, your body, like everything is so connected, right?
Yeah.
That's really, really interesting. Can you explain us a little bit more about like the core principles of naturopathic medicine? I'm sure like a lot of our customers, they've heard that term in the past, even like holistic medicine, but can you maybe explain this further, like what does it mean and how do you approach it personally? Because I'm sure this is a very wide space. So how do you approach this type of medicine?
It's a really good point. There are no two naturopathic doctors who are alike. However, there is a underlying foundational understanding and philosophy of naturopathic medicine. And at the core of that is actually one of the words is the name of my company, Vis Foods. The core principle of naturopathic medicine is called Vis Medicatrix Naturae, and that's Latin for the healing power of nature. And so essentially what that entails is that there's this force, this vital force that is present in all life. And that vital force is moving everything, including our cells and our being, into balance. So our responsibility, therefore, is not to fix it or not to force it. It's to allow that process to happen. So a lot of traditional naturopathic medicine has kind of been a little bit contaminated with so many supplements and even pharmaceuticals. But the traditional approach is to really get out of the way, to take things away that are interfering with the body's innate healing potential. Usually it's not deficiencies that are the problem. Usually it's more toxicities or excesses, at least in our today's day and age, that are getting in the way of people accessing their innate healing potential. So that's really the core principle, is the healing power of nature.
That's amazing. Yeah, because in a way, like I've always thought like everything is connected, and I bring this to my products, in TerraSeed is where the earth and your body and everything is connected in a way, right? Like even like human to human, we are all one in a way, right? Like I really resonate with your approach. You mentioned toxicity and how like there are so many cleanses and detox programs these days, and like I always wonder which one is the right one, or what is your approach when it comes to detox programs. And yeah, like I love what you were sharing about your inner capacity to heal, right? How these programs normally work, and what do you think about them?
Yeah. So again, so many detox programs are all about putting more things in.
Yeah.
So the rule of detoxification, the first rule of detoxification is stop putting toxins in your body, which is a lot easier said than done, especially in today's world, right? Where they are ubiquitous and invisible, and they're in our food, air, and water, and we're eating, drinking, and breathing every day. So, the first thing that we need to do is just be mindful of our consumption. Our consumption of food choices, choosing certified organic foods, and ideally, minimizing the exposure to plastics, because even like certified organic foods can be wrapped in a plastic container, and you can get a good dose of hormone disrupting chemicals in your certified organic food because of that contamination, if you will. So being mindful of what's going in your body, both in terms of your food and also, of course, your water contaminants and your air, purifying these sorts of things, or ideally, living away from pollution and more closely connected with nature. And of course, that's not as accessible to most people. So anyways, that's rule number one, is just to mitigate toxin exposure. And
Can
then,
I interrupt just
yeah, of
just
course.
a sec? You mentioned like cleaning the air, cleaning the water. Do you recommend having like a filter for your water, or like some special equipment for air cleaning? Like what is your approach there?
Yeah, well, I always look to nature. So the best water is natural spring water, and of course, that most people don't have access to a natural spring. So most people are getting water out of some sort of municipally treated water system. Therefore, it should be filtered. So yes, recommend drinking filtered water for sure. And then in terms of air, best thing to do is breathe air that has been filtered and produced and oxygenated from our trees, right? And our plants. So the next best thing that we can do is, of course, we're not outside all day. So the fact is that our outdoor air is going to be cleaner and clearer and more invigorating than our indoor air, even in a clean indoor environment. So opening up windows, getting good air circulation, airflow, bringing in house plants, which are natural air purifiers, is super helpful. But also being mindful of the, artificial fragrances that are, and cleaning products that are off-gassing and chemicals from things. But to your point, yeah, like, so anyways, I listed a lot of things to maybe consider doing before bringing in an air filter. I think a lot of people just go to the latest gadgets and the high tech stuff. There's a lot of like low hanging fruit, cheap, easy things that we can do to clean up our environment that don't involve getting expensive air purification systems.
Like opening the windows every morning and let the air into your house, right? Like sometimes it's things as simple as that. I'm originally from Spain, and we do that process actually every day, where we open the windows in a house so there's circulation of the air inside the house. And it's just like a habit we have in Spain that I'm surprised I'm not seeing that in the US as much. So
I know, right? Yeah, I remember when I was in naturopathic medical school, there were these old textbooks, or I don't think they were like academic textbooks, but they're books about natural healing. And one of them, I remember there was a picture of, maybe you're familiar with the idea of a sleeping porch.
Yes.
One of the first line treatments for people with, just kind of acute ailments was, sleeping outside, because you're naturally breathing more fresh air, which is so important. Like air, we think about food as being important, water important. Air is kind of the most important, and the way that we're breathing and the quality of air that we're breathing turns out to be super important. So being outside is the best thing we can do.
Totally. I was listening to this podcast, and this woman was saying, open your car window and let the air inside, even if because we spend so much time indoors, right? Like it's interesting. So just simple tips.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, most people feel better when they go for a hike in nature, and you have to stop and wonder, why is that?
Why?
Well, you're doing natural things. Like, for sure, you're moving your body, and everyone should be doing that. But I think it's really just like the fresh, energy of nature, and rather than the, manufactured synthetic technologies of man.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you when you were going to mention the second way of like approaching
Yeah.
detoxification.
So the first step is kind of just to be mindful and audit our inputs in terms of food, air, and water, and kind of clean things up. And side note, I don't recommend that people get super neurotic about this, because of course that can create a lot of stress. And for a lot of people, like the more the more stressed you feel.
Yeah.
So of course, being mindful of you don't want to make yourself crazy with all this stuff. But yes, the second thing is to, of course, hone in on nutritional density and hydration status to support the natural detoxification processes.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of conventionally minded doctors or health practitioners would say, "Oh yeah, you don't need a detox because your body detoxes naturally." And yeah, that's 100% true when it has the proper requirements for detoxification, which are essentially, to simplify it, tons of nutrients and tons of water. But most people are deficient in many of the vital nutrients that are required for liver detoxification processes, and most people are also chronically dehydrated.
Mm-hmm.
So that combination of nutritional deficiencies and dehydration doesn't allow for the natural detoxification processes to take place. So a good quote unquote detox will just be focusing on flooding the body with nutrients. There are specific foods and things that can be considered, but general nutritional, just general nutrients from fruits and vegetables, and also flooding the body with water.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically water that is mineralized, water from foods, water from fruits and vegetables, I should say, is really great because it's naturally structured and mineralized and gets into your cells optimally. A lot of people are drinking, quote unquote, dead water that just kind of flows through the body without really penetrating the cells to promote the cleansing processes. So nutrients and hydration are kind of the ingredients for detoxification.
That's really interesting. Do you think the lack of hydration these days come from the quality of the water, or is more like we don't drink enough, we don't eat enough vegetables and fruits that contain water, or why do you think is that
Most people, I think most people, it's both. Most people are not drinking enough water and fluids and liquids, and or they're also drinking too many dehydrating liquids. A lot of people think, oh, I'm drinking coffee, I'm drinking alcohol, I must be hydrated because those are liquids, but those are actually dehydrating to the body. And also processed foods, specific, just think about it. Like if you're eating crackers and, I don't want to like food shame or anything, but just consider the water content in a cracker versus an apple. An apple is maybe 85-90% water. A cracker is like 10 or 12% water or something like that. So when we eat crackers, they actually draw water out of our body.
Wow.
We're either hydrating or dehydrating ourselves.
Dehydrating with food.
So a lot of people who are eating lots of processed foods are dehydrating themselves.
Wow. Because the body needs all that water to process these type of foods, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
you just think about when we go to the bathroom, we're going to the bathroom and there's water that's leaving our body. So in order to hydrate our bowels and our kidneys, we need the water has to come from our body. So when we put in dry foods and also to some extent dried fruits, dried fruits are not terrible, but they're not as good as fresh fruits because they're not hydrating us.
That's really interesting. Wow. I keep saying this. This is interesting. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. Yeah, I'm learning stuff. I feel like I hardly know anything, to be honest.
Yeah. It's only so much you can experience and you can know, right? Like it's hard to know everything, but I always value people's experiences because I believe that you've seen thousands of patients, and you've learned a lot from your practice, right? At the end of the day, that's probably what is really the source
Yeah.
of knowledge, in your case. Let's move a little bit to a plant-based diet, right? Most of our customers follow a plant-based or a vegan diet, and there's always questions around that. Like, what are the most common nutritional gaps that people who follow this type of diets experience? Do we need to supplement? Are the triad, I always see like the most essential nutrients you need as a vegan is B12, D3, and omegas. But you may have like a different approach or different thoughts about that. Yeah, can you maybe explain a little bit what is your experience also in your practice when you work with plant-based eaters, and what do you recommend
Yeah. So is your question specifically about supplementation?
in terms of supplementation and the key nutrients that we as vegans need to take? And you mentioned before, sometimes we don't need as many supplements because your body's able to heal and adapt and give us everything we need. But in a diet where you're restricting some foods, that come from animals, in this case, like what happens there?
Yeah. Well, just to be clear, so all of the plant-based diet is lacking nothing. There's nothing
Okay.
that we need that comes from animals.
Okay.
So some people think like, oh, well, animals have collagen or creatine or there's a lot of animal-based supplementation, like the things that are getting even more popular these days, like liver or like. But anyways, to answer your question about supplementation on a plant-based diet, really the only thing that is required is B12. And that's not because B12 comes from animals. A lot of people think, oh yeah, I got my steak, so my B12 is covered. Well, B12 is actually comes from bacteria. And the fact of the matter is that in today's world, through reasons beyond my understanding evolutionarily, the B12 producing bacteria are simply deficient in our environment. My understanding is that humans used to get good dose of B12 producing bacteria from drinking natural spring water, from eating, raw, from the dirt, from being more exposed to nature, essentially. So anyways, most animals that people eat on an omnivorous or animal-based diet are supplemented with B12 as well.
Mhm.
So the question is just like, do you want to get B12 supplemented like directly into your mouth, or do you want to get it through the animal? So anyways, B12 is essential for healthy red blood cells, and other things. And then of course, the next one that you mentioned, vitamin D, most people are vitamin D deficient, and that again is not coming through animals. Vitamin D, most people know, is actually more like a hormone that our body synthesizes when we are exposed to the sun. And there are different theories around this, but the fact is that most people, back to connecting with nature, most people are not spending enough time outside during the peak hours of the day when the sun is higher in the sky, where they can be synthesizing that vitamin D. And as a result, most people are actually pretty severely deficient in vitamin D without supplementation. So vitamin D, like you said, super helpful for overall health. It does so much in the body, from calcium regulation to immune function and beyond. And then you
Omegas.
also brought up omegas, and
Mhm.
this is a little bit of a, maybe you're familiar with the controversy and contentious nature of the omega-3 conversation in the plant-based community. And my take on it is that ideally, we don't need to supplement with omega-3s. Really, what matters more than just quantity of omega-3s in our body is the balance and the specific ratio of omega-3s to omega-6s and other fatty acids in our bodies. So yes, we need to have that ratio in balance. And my personal take on it is, if we are not eating too many processed foods and not eating too many omega-6 fats, then we probably don't really need to supplement with omega-3, but it's really also highly individualized. Maybe there are some genetic components that make people more in higher need of greater amounts of omega-3, which is, and this omega-3, like we think of it as being an anti-inflammatory compound and these sorts of things, but really, and that's true. But really, I think about it more as like long-term insurance for cognitive and nervous system health.
Mm-hmm.
So I see it as more as like an insurance policy. So my personal relationship with omega-3s is getting them from freshly ground flax seeds and chia seeds.
Mm-hmm.
That being like kind of my quote unquote supplement of omega-3s. And also, of course, there's walnuts are rich in omega-3s, but you can also, there's the algae-based supplementation, and yeah, you're more probably as much of an expert on it as I am.
I just wanted to know more, like, from your experience again. When I created Terra City, was because I was very aware that a lot of vegans don't follow like a diet that allows them to make sure they are taking all the nutrients they need. Like these days is so easy to just go on more processed foods and figuring out what do I need to eat on a weekly basis to make sure I get all the nutrients I have. And sometimes it's easier the way you're putting it. I'm loving it because it's simple, right? Like eat your fruits and vegetables and seeds and nuts, and everything is there. However, for a lot of our customers, they reach out explaining, giving us their stories, like, I went to see the doctor and I was deficient on all these nutrients. And like I would love to see, or like to hear, what is your experience in your practice, when it comes to people who follow a plant-based diet, and what's going on there? Why are they nutrient deficient? What are you seeing, and why do you think that's the case?
So can you clarify that question again? Sorry.
Yeah. So, like in I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you're seeing nutrient deficiencies in your patients in your practice who follow a plant-based diet, and why do you think that happens? If that's what you're saying, right? Like we work with other plant-based doctors who are sharing this with us. Like, we are seeing in our practice people who don't have like maybe knowledge or the means, or like the criteria, if you want, to make sure they take all the nutrients they need. Therefore, they need to supplement until they get there. So is that what you're seeing? Do you see like plant-based eaters at your practice who are deficient, and why do you think that's the case? Do you think it's what I'm explaining, like not being able to follow like the proper diet, or what do you think that's happening there?
Well, first I have to be fully honest. I don't do a lot of testing, nutritional testing in my practice.
Okay.
That's I kind of leave it up to individuals. I personally, I think it's usually not a highly valuable thing to do. A lot of people, I think our health comes from things beyond just our numbers in our labs, which is a whole.
Do you think they get a bit obsessed with the numbers. Oh, I'm deficient on with
Totally.
oh,
Because
right.
everyone's different. So it's like, okay, you're this and that person's that, and this is the
Okay.
standard. And are you low? But it's like, are you low for you? I don't know. I don't like, sure, there might be, meta-analyses done to establish these, reference ranges and whatnot, but still everyone's different. And also it's just a snapshot in time. So that this just, is my philosophy around lab testing in general.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer your question about people being nutritionally deficient and requiring supplementation, I think that there are reasons for this. Yeah, I think you brought up earlier kind of what are potential pitfalls of like a plant-based diet. And, the main one that I see almost 100% of the time is people not eating enough in general, because plant-based diets are so much lower, are more nutrient dense, less calorically dense. So people see like a volume, the plate of food, and there's like, okay, that's like a good volume of food. And, this is enough. And I fell into this trap personally pretty bad. And anyways, so what happens is like they become deficient kind of across the board because they're just simply not taking in enough food. And on top of that, people live back to the environment. People live in a stressful environment where they're under physiologic stress from overthinking, from stressful thinking. They're exposed to environmental toxins, so their nutrient demands increase. So that discrepancy between nutritional intake and nutritional demand, creates a nutritional deficiency, especially over the longer term. So that kind of sets the stage for requiring or doing better with supplementation of some sort to kind of cover the bases. But we can largely avoid that by being mindful and eating enough of specifically enough of the whole foods. This is of course a whole other conversation, right? Like plant-based eating in today's world doesn't in any way equate to health. A lot of people think, oh, I eat plant-based, that means I must be eating healthy. Well, there is plant-based everything. So that doesn't, it's like, what are you eating? It tells us what you're not eating, but not necessarily what you are eating. So of course, it's best to be more whole food, plant-based. And when we're doing that, that's even more difficult because those whole foods are even less calorically dense. So anyways, hopefully you get what I'm,
yeah.
saying
And I'm very, I was shocked to hear that. Like, that's the number one thing you see, like, we're not eating enough because you need more of these good calories or good, like we need to eat more as plant-based eaters. Like, I think that's very eye-opening, at least for me, right now. So that's awesome. I'm very interested to learn more about that connection between your emotions, your mind, your body. How do you treat your patients from that perspective, and what do you see? I'm sure there's no one or the other that is more important, but maybe one that is not taken into consideration as much. Or can you explain a little bit more about like that connection, and how do you work with your patients from that perspective?
Yeah. Well, I think that the mind is the most important. I think, undoubtedly. And the reason why I say that so confidently, because I've seen plenty of people who are eating pristine diets and living clean lifestyles and doing all the right things physically, and they're still in not the best place. And it's very clear that that's due to, whether it be emotional, quote unquote, issues or nervous system dysregulation. There's something that's not physical that needs to be addressed. And actually, I'll never forget one of my earliest patients when I was a student in the teaching clinic was a woman who had, severe digestive issues. And she came in like with this bag of supplements, and she was talking about like going out on vacation and having this suitcase full of supplements and following her strict diet when she was on vacation and taking her supplements, but she was still suffering. And I was just like, this isn't your issue is nowhere to be found in a diet or a supplement, you know? And you know, we need to like be in a peaceful place and trust our bodies, trust nature. So I think that when we are in a peaceful place, and maybe only when we are in a peaceful place, then we can make the naturally common sense informed decisions that help us to take care of ourselves best. So answering your question, like how do I work with people in this domain? I'm actually just kind of leaning into it more so myself, professionally. And I don't really know. You know, I think I don't have like a
formula or
regimen or a method. It's really just on an individual basis, helping people understand where they are, like where their thoughts are in relationship to their bodies and their health. And I think a lot of people have been, I guess the word that comes to mind is like traumatized by the medical system. They've been fed so much fear, so many diagnoses, so many labs, so many tests. They're in a state of like overload with their system, and they are taking on all of these beliefs and thoughts. And there's this phenomenon known as the nocebo effect, where, you know, most people are familiar with placebo, where it's like you take some blank treatment and it makes you feel better. And that's because we are capable of healing ourselves innately, internally, from within. But there's also the nocebo effect, which is kind of the inverse of that. When we go to the doctor and they say, oh, you know, you've got a herniated disc in your back, that would explain your back pain, or oh, you know, you're, you know, anemic, that would explain your fatigue. Then we actually manifest those symptoms even more so. It kind of more deeply ingrains the patterns physiologically and you know, neurologically that create our experience of health and symptoms or symptoms. So anyways, just helping people see the way that we are creating our experience is really my intention. And of course, like going back to my story of like having that insight in a moment, like, oh, you know, the cool thing is that someone's experience can change like in an instant. And we don't know when and how that insight is going to happen. But I always like to encourage people and get them to consider that insight is like waiting to be experienced, right there beneath the surface. So
I feel like we are ill-equipped to understand what is good for us. You know, what is the energy that these foods, for example, in the case of like diets or the environment or habits, or, you know, what is good for me, like to experience, these foods, even like eating. I know that I've developed myself, you know, like a way of like understanding when I eat something, how do I feel? No, if it's giving me, you know, like a stomach ache or nothing like that. You know, it's more like the energy of that food and what happens in my body or in my mind or my emotions, even when I eat these versus when I eat these other things, right? It will be really nice to be helped to develop this skill of understanding, you know, what is good for me. Is it good to be out in nature or do this type of activity? Or, you know, it's just like we are in this system where life happens to us, right? Like it's just like, okay, I didn't even have time to sit and feel. And I don't know, I guess that everyone is different, and I love your the way you work with your patients, where everyone is different, right? Like, and everyone needs different things. So I guess that personalization will be another key approach, I guess, in your practice. Something else, I know we're running out of time, but just maybe you can explain a little bit about your product and how did you come up with a green powder. um Tell us more about Green Force and what made you decide to go into that direction and create this product, and who would benefit from it.
Yeah. Well, I've been experimenting with and taking a greens powder of some type for probably about 15 years. And I've been through, there's tons out there, right? So, I didn't, on one hand, it's like, did the world really need another greens
Another
powder?
powder.
But really the last 10 years or so, I've been just making my own because I'm looking at what's on the shelf and they're either way overpriced, or the ones that maybe are higher quality, they're way overpriced, or they're just like garbage. And I say that lovingly. But the fact is that the trends in our world today, and I'm sure you're familiar and seeing it too, is that like more of everything. Like, we need like 75 ingredients and doing everything. And after being educated in nutritional science and biochemistry, it's like, this doesn't make sense. It makes sense from a marketing standpoint. Like, sure, I would love to have a magic pill that does everything, but actually it doesn't. So if I can't do everything, like what can and what should a greens powder do? Well, it should just be providing tons of vitamins and minerals and maybe others targeted compounds to promote detoxification and metabolism, which are really the central processes that keep us living and thriving. So yes, the Green Force is a really simplified formula with just 7 ingredients, and the 7 ingredients are high quality, nutritionally dense ingredients. A lot of greens powders just have like spinach powder and broccoli powder and kale powder, and it's like, okay, well, those aren't bad, but we should be eating those foods. We should be getting the nutrients from those foods
Directly.
but barley grass juice powder and wheatgrass juice powder and spirulina powder and broccoli sprout powder. There's a lot of foods that are super, we call them superfoods or something like that, because they're super nutritionally dense and offer unique nutritional constituents and properties, but we're not going to be eating or having enough access to those kind of things.
To those, yeah.
So a greens powder is kind of just filling general gaps in daily nutrition, specifically in terms of mineral content and vitamin content. And in the case of Green Force, there's also the broccoli sprout powder, which is a great source of sulforaphane, which is a sulfur-based compound that promotes phase 2 detoxification in the liver, which is super important, amongst other things. So yeah, Green Force is not just another greens powder. I frankly, like, I've sifted through hundreds and hundreds of ingredient lists, and I'm like, these are all the same, but this is not. So yeah, I'm hoping to help people understand the unique position that Green Force has in that space. And yeah, and it tends, even though there's no sweeteners or fluff in there, it's also actually pretty good tasting, which I'm pleasant to have that sort of feedback, because I feel like my taste buds, like, I can tolerate anything. So I'm like, all right, I enjoy it, but what do other people think? And so far the feedback has been generally good. There's a few people who have been like, this is a little much, I gotta water it down or put it in juice or put it in a smoothie. But just mixing it up in water is a great experience.
It's very convenient. Yeah, it's just water for the water. Yeah, I'm actually I can't wait to try it, because we just connected, but we haven't discussed this, but maybe you could offer like some promo or something to our customers to purchase Green Force, and I'm sure
be happy to figure something out. I mean, yeah, Yeah, if you want
We'll
to
work
like,
on that.
yeah,
We'll
we'll
work on
we'll
that.
get some discount for you for sure.
Okay. Well, Ben, yeah, like time flies. It's just like 50 minutes later. But I just want to just finish this conversation maybe with like a final takeaway, especially for plant-based eaters who are most of our customers follow a plant-based or a vegan diet. So any final thoughts or takeaways or recommendations, for people who follow this type of diets, and also from this holistic perspective? Can you just like finish up with a summary?
Sure. Yeah. There's two things that come to mind. One, the physical nutritional thing, which is be sure that you're eating enough. Don't be afraid to eat more good things.
Mhm.
I like to tell people that there's like whole foods that come from the earth that aren't in packages. We can eat as much as that as we want. We can't overeat whole foods. We'll be full. So just eat enough whole foods. Focus on whole foods, and you're good to go. Don't overthink. Even if your goal, which I know a lot of people have the goal of weight release or weight management, even if your goal is weight release, stop thinking about portion control and cutting
Mhm.
down.
Great.
Start focusing more on just nourishment. Your
Mhm.
body is craving nourishment, so let yourself indulge in whole foods. So
Okay.
that's my recommendation nutritionally. And then kind of that leads into maybe a recommendation more metaphysically, which is trust your body, trust nature, trust your process. Your body is not broken. It never was. It never will be. It can't break. Your body knows exactly what it's doing. So do whatever you can to get out of the way, in terms of your overthinking or whatever other habits that you have. Just raise more awareness to how you might be getting in the way and impeding your body's self-healing energy and potential.
Mhm. That's amazing advice. And to be honest, I've studied and read so many different studies and books on plant-based eating, and like I think these two recommendations, I don't think they are top of mind, for a lot of people, and they are not as intuitive. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's very useful. And yeah, thanks for being here with me today and doing this experiment of interviewing someone, for customers of TerraSeed. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you
Yeah,
for
thank you,
everything.
Maria.
Okay. Bye.
All right, bye. All right.
Yeah.